Hello everyone, this is Vignesh from Phoenix Financial Trading here to share a few tips relevant to the June 2017 P5 examination. As you've been preparing for the exam, you all probably appreciate by now that this is not a knowledge-based exam. All it needs is huge amounts of application, use of question, information, synthesizing that into your answers to illustrate points. As long as you allocate your time in a justified manner across the questions depending on marks available, and use question information effectively in your answers to illustrate points and write enough for the available marks, you should do really well. However, it is always comforting to know a few areas that frequently come up in the exam, and it's always nice to have those come up in the exam when you sat there inside the exam hall. So in that context, I'll share a few commonly tested areas, which are as follows. You could have questions in the exam where the examiner gives you a report or many a time a list of KPIs the company currently measures and wants you to evaluate these KPIs. Evaluation of KPIs is all down to whether these KPIs are relevant, trying to link these back to the goals of the company, the objectives of the company, to try and see whether these KPIs suit or meet the information needs of the company. If a KPI doesn't measure what's important to the organization, if a KPI doesn't measure what is critical for the success of the organization, what's the point? So you could direct your attention and energy in that on those lines, trying to look at the objectives and trying to see whether the KPIs are relevant and measuring those objectives. Alternatively, the examiner may want you to suggest new KPIs, and when you suggest new KPIs, please try and take into account the context of the question. Try to come up with KPIs relevant to the industry that is covered in the question, and wherever possible, try to explain how those are relevant in the given context. Sometimes these KPIs may be required to be calculated as well. If the examiner explicitly wants you to calculate a particular ratio, you must be able to do that based on numbers given in the question. Please watch out when the examiner says evaluate a report or evaluate KPIs and he gives you some numbers. He's not expecting you to evaluate those numbers. It's only when he says evaluate performance do you need to talk about whether the numbers have gone up or down. When he says evaluate KPIs, evaluate report, he wants you to talk about the relevance of the KPIs or how good the report is in satisfying the information needs of the company. Besides this, in terms of number bits, please be prepared to do a little bit of calculations on things like break-even point, on expected value, other basic ratios like ROCE, gross margins, and so on, which is basically assumed knowledge coming into P5. These are all 1-mark ratios you could be asked. Expected value is definitely worth a little bit more. So the examiner could ask you to do expected operating profit or expected ROCE, in which case you need to calculate a number of different ROCEs or a number of different profits and then multiply it by the probability to get to the expected value. Besides this, you could be asked to reproduce a profit statement using a different transfer price than what is already being followed. So obviously the context of the question will be 2 divisions and you're asked to check what impact a change in the transfer price will have. So you might be asked to reproduce the income statement. Few marks, 7 marks, redo the income statement to see how the profitability is affected due to a change in the transfer pricing system. Economic value added is definitely a topic you must be right on top. Learn the adjustments for NOPAT, capital employed, WACC. WACC is pretty straightforward, though it's mainly capital employed and NOPAT that you need to learn the adjustments for. In terms of other wordy bits, which is what will form majority of the paper, please do be prepared to evaluate reward systems. The examiner tells you this is how people get rewarded, and he will want you to talk about how people will behave. Will there be any behavioral issues associated with you rewarding people on a certain basis? You give people rewards, for example, based on profits, and how would that make them behave, for example? Would that result in short-termism, whatever, something on those lines you should be prepared for. Another thing that you must be familiar and be used to doing is the examiner suggesting implementation of a new system. This could be anything. It could be a business process re-engineering exercise. It could be implementation of JIT, and the examiner wants you to talk about impact of that on the company. So you could get a question on any new system being implemented and how that will affect the company. Please also be prepared for questions on the non-financial models, such as the building block model and the performance pyramid. Knowing these models gives you few easy marks, but then it's all about application. So if you're asked to evaluate KPIs given in a question using a performance pyramid or using the dimensions aspect of the building block model, you need to be prepared to pick up each heading and try and match the current KPIs with those headings within these models to try and see what is measured and what is missing. And many a time when something is missing, you need to suggest new justified KPIs. Now, when you talk of the building block model, it's not just about the dimensions. There are also these standards and rewards blocks within the building block, which means the model could be used even to assess whether standards and targets are being set the right way and whether the reward systems are appropriate. Please also be familiar with some of the challenges and problems with using non-financial models like building block and balance scorecard and so on. That is a topic the examiners continue to test repeatedly, and as long as you are aware of what the issues are, such as information overload and prioritization of KPIs becoming an issue. So there are some standard points which I'm sure you can pick up if you do look at some of the past exam questions. That will do you a lot of good going into the exam. So I think that covers more or less all the key points. As I've mentioned, transfer pricing, EVA, evaluation of KPIs, evaluation of reports, evaluation of a change in the system, the impact of that on the company. These are all some of the key topics. The key, as I've mentioned, is all about time management, writing enough and writing relevant points. Please avoid just waffling general knowledge. Knowledge gets you about 20 to 25% of the marks, but 75% of the marks there in most questions are for using question information to illustrate a point. It's not just repeating question info, it's using question info to come to a conclusion, using question info to justify the point that you are making. So I hope you keep practicing, and I hope the exam goes really well. Stay calm, composed. As I've mentioned, try to use as much question info in your answer as possible, and your results should be very positive. I wish you all the very best. Thank you for listening.